I've always said, it's not about what you say, it's about what you do. Don't shout about problems, deal with problems. Don't talk tough, be tough. I'm very proud of the fact that you've just provided evidence that I have not changed my tune since the days when I was first cutting my teeth in politics. I've always been about delivery, because any idiot can talk a good game. We should be judged, and at this election we were judged on whether we delivered against that rhetoric. And the truth was, we didn't deliver enough. So therefore the answer is not ramp up the rhetoric, the answer is ramp up the delivery.
We have a real treat on the Veterans in Politics as part of this Conservative Leadership Special that we seem to be adopting during season 10 of this podcast. And surprise, surprise, I'm back in a politician's office and they all look the same, don't they? Well, it depends on where you go within Westminster. But I'm sat with an old friend from my days of London politics, and that's James Cleverly. James, how's the campaign going so far?
Yeah, it's good, Johnny. It's really good. Got through now to the final four, which means I go to conference. Conference is a bit of a home fixture for me. I've been deputy chairman of the party. I've been knocking on doors in constituencies all over the country. I think I'm well known by the membership. So this is, as I say, very much a home fixture. And looking forward to it. It's going to be quite intense this year with all the leadership stuff. But,
yeah, and they could be quite pivotal. I remember being in Blackpool for the famous David Cameron speech, which still sends a bit of chills down the spine, if I'm honest. It was one of those amazing speeches, so do look it up.
Yeah.
But like with all of our guests, we like to just delve into a bit of your military past, because that's the thing that connects us, service, and in particular the Army Reserves, of which we're both passionate about. But can you tell us how you found the Army Reserves and what that gave you as in terms of your career?
Yeah, so look, for those, I mean, you know me. A lot of people that are listening to this podcast might not. So I'm start off with the confessional bit. I have had a long, but not what anyone would describe as a particularly glorious military career. I've loved my time in the reserve forces. I got mobilised in 2004. Like a lot of people mobilised at that time, I was kind of expecting that I was going to go to southern Iraq. But it was around the time when the first couple of waves of people that are mobilised in Optelic had started coming back and had really struggled to get their jobs back. And the British Army went, oh, crikey, we got to get a grip of this. So I got mobilised. Instead of going to Iraq, I got sent to Luton, which was not quite what I was expecting. And my job was to make sure that the reservists, the gunners from basically the southern half of the UK, southern half of England at least, had jobs to come back to. It's not what I was expecting to do when I got mobilised, but you realise actually it was a really, really, really important job. And maybe one extra staff officer at headquarters in M&D South East, I could have added a bit of value. But actually making sure that those boys and girls had jobs to come back to was potentially a bigger value add. Not particularly glamorous, not particularly glorious, but I'm genuinely quite glad that I did that.
It was a really important time for us, because I worked for Defence Relationship Management in the MOD, which was a lesson learned from that, quite frankly, ugly period of people, twice the citizen we were called as a reservist, putting themselves forward for deployments and then coming home to not find a job. So that's a really important part, and I would say don't be so hard on yourself in that. But it's not as if you shied away from it, because you did P Company as well.
Well, I had a crack at that. I wasn't ultimately successful. So I had this weird situation when I was made a battery commander. I had to merge an airborne battery and a commando battery.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and that was a real eye opener, and I love that. I loved that challenge, and it was a tough organisational challenge, and maybe we touch upon that about how to bring teams together, particularly teams that have got different cultures. How you have to test yourself at the same time of being able to deliver a job, and it was a really interesting challenge when I was trying to get my own physical fitness up to a certain level, whilst also providing leadership for soldiers. And it wasn't a choice of doing one or the other. You got to do both, and you got to do both at the same time. And that was a real eye opener for me. And as I say, just the logistics. No, not the logistics. That's the wrong word. But the challenges of that integrating of people who are very, very proud of themselves, very proud of their identity, their heritage. And the thing that really struck me, and I'll probably get slaughtered by both my maroon-lidded and green-lidded friends, people who convinced themselves they were very, very, very different to each other.
Yeah.
Whereas someone stepping in who had done neither of those, very, very demanding courses, you could say, well, hang on a second. I can see what unites you. I can see the similarities, and you're defining yourselves by the differences rather than by the similarities and overlaps. And that was a real eye-opener for me.
Do you think that's something you're going to take into this challenge? Because I know you're focusing on about uniting the party. Is that something you've picked up from your military career, and obviously go through Sandhurst as well, that will advantage you as you go forward for leadership of the Conservative Party?
I think so. I know so. And the reason it's so very, very important is whether you are in a military team or a political team or a sports team or whatever it may be, having that mission, having that unifying purpose, having the flag around which you rally, having that focus is how you drive delivery. And I've had some people say, "Oh yeah, unity, yeah, that's easy. Anyone can say that." Yeah, well, anyone can say it. That's not the point. Achieving it, as we know, if it was that bloody easy, we wouldn't have been just turfed out of government in one of the worst results that we've had in our party's entire history. Unity is not the easy option; it's the hard option. But it's also the foundation stone upon which all other success is built. Rugby team. I'm a rugby player. Rugby teams all trying to run in different directions are not going to score any tries, not going to win any matches. Infantry, everyone at Sandhurst gets trained at least basic level to do infantry work. What's the first thing you do? You identify the objective, and you make sure everyone knows what they're working towards to stop people physically running off in different directions. And it's metaphorically true in politics as well. You need to know what you're trying to achieve. You need to know why you're trying to achieve it. You all need to subscribe to that mission, and you all need to pull in the right direction. And if you don't, then nothing else matters. Doesn't matter what policies you've got, doesn't matter how much money you got in the bank, doesn't matter how good your candidates are. If you don't coalesce around the mission, nothing else matters.
And I guess for a lot of us watchers, as a former Conservative Party agent myself, we're going to be really interested to see, using another metaphor from the military, if you're going to be going further right flanking, or bags of smoke up the centre. How do you think the direction of the Conservative Party will respond to the challenges it faces?
So actually using that, look, I try to not use military metaphors all the time. I mean, Jonny,
this target audience is good for that. Our listeners are a military. Yeah.
But you will know that politicians, many of whom have never spent a second in uniform, love, talk about the air war, the ground war, and all this kind of stuff. It makes them feel tough. But look, the thing that I've observed in terms of leadership is that, back in the day when generals took to the field, they were right in the centre of their troops. They're in the heart of their troops. And you need to have a strong right flank, and you need to have a strong left flank, and you need to have a strong centre. But the leader has to be able to exert authority and command over both flanks and the centre forces. You can't command from one of the flanks. Generals do not position themselves on one edge or another of their troops. They're at the heart of their unit. That's where the leader's got to be. And in terms of how we move forward, actually, we should have, this is where the military metaphor stops and we become exclusively political. We should have the self-confidence as the Conservative Party. We are the oldest and most successful political movement in human history. We don't have to go chasing after other political parties' agendas. We know what we believe in. We believe in personal opportunity and freedom. We believe that lower taxes are liberating. We believe less red tape allows businesses and entrepreneurs to thrive. We know that people need a stake in society, whether that's shares in British companies, whether that's a home of their own, that they should feel secure on their streets, well policed, but with a police force that deals with everybody equally, fairly, without prejudice. And this is where, for this audience, I think it is really relevant. We need to understand that unless we are willing to commit to defend ourselves and what we believe in, again, nothing else matters. We have underinvested in defence for too long. We've been harvesting the peace dividend from the Cold War for about 20 years too long. Anyone that's seen service accommodation knows it's not up to par. Anyone that's seen some of our basic military equipment knows that we are now running towards right at the tail end of the lifespan of that military equipment, and the new stuff is not coming online quickly enough. And anyone that's had any dealings in our relationship with Ukraine knows that we have used a lot of our stockpiles to help Ukrainians quite rightly defend themselves. But we should have been producing, I'm a gunner, we should have been producing bucket loads of 155, and we should have done from the minute the Russian tanks crossed the Ukrainian border, and we haven't done enough. And we need to make sure that we catch up with where we should have been and set ourselves up for where we need to be in the future.
It's crystal clear what you believe in, James, and unfortunately the country didn't believe in it in the last general election, and that's the task at hand. But I'm really interested to know what you think the activists believe in too. I remember in 2008 I was in a room at the Freedom Zone at Conservative Party conference. I wasn't there supporting you, actually. I was there supporting my wife, because she stood up and did this debating competition. I don't know if you remember that. On the panel was Ian Dale and Nadine Dorries as the judges,
right,
and some bloke called James Cleverly stood up on the stage, and that was the first time I'd heard you speak in public.
Right.
And I remember what you said to us all in the room that day. As Conservative activists and professionals in opposition, you gave your oratory, because it was a debating competition, and you said to us all in the room, don't get angry, get even.
Wow. I don't genuinely don't remember that, but it's really interesting you say that, because one of the points that I've been trying to get across in this leadership thing is, as a party that exists in order to govern, that's why we're here. We're not a lobby group. We're not a charitable organisation. We exist to provide good government to the British people. I've always said, it's not about what you say, it's about what you do. Don't shout about problems, deal with problems. Don't talk tough, be tough. I'm very proud of the fact that you've just provided evidence that I have not changed my tune since the days when I was first cutting my teeth in politics. I've always been about delivery, because any idiot can talk a good game. We should be judged, and at this election we were judged on whether we delivered against that rhetoric. And the truth was, we didn't deliver enough. So therefore the answer is not ramp up the rhetoric, the answer is ramp up the delivery.
And I didn't send you a freebie for
No, I had no idea you were going to come. I had no idea you were going to go.
I remember it. And I was a relatively new Conservative Party agent cutting my teeth. You were a London Assembly member. And I wanted to see the genuine human reaction to that little dip. Because I remember it well. My wife was, now my wife, my girlfriend at the time, working in politics. And she was so nervous. And I think we all walked away from there having learned a bit about public speaking, yes, but also about belief and what that... It definitely inspired the room. And in fact, if I remember rightly, you won that competition. So who's to say? There's another competition you're in at the moment that
That's
you're seeking
plan.
to win.
In it to win it, mate. Well, look, and the point is, the views that I held then, back when being a right winger in the Conservative Party was a bit unfashionable, it's come very much back into fashion now, and I think a lot of people, want to paint themselves in those colours. But I remember when being a Thatcherite, when you'd have to whisper it, and I've always been me. I've always, my dad started a business under Margaret Thatcher, and it thrived. I started a business under Gordon Brown, and it died. And so, I've felt it. I've seen it. I've seen the difference between a government which doesn't try and meddle in everyone's lives, but facilitates people really making the best of themselves, and governments who are constantly prodding and poking and messing and meddling, and the stifling effect that has. and I've seen it. I've lived through it, and I want to make sure we get back to those habits in government that really liberate, rather than the habits in government that limit.
Yeah, and I think people will understand you on the TV screens and the politician James, but also hopefully I've shared a bit of the person James. And the last time we had exchanged words was at Conservative Party conference, and I was recovering from serious trauma.
Yeah.
And you stopped in the corridor and said, "How's the leg?" And I just wanted to say thanks for actually caring, because it was a pretty difficult time for me and Lydia at that time, going through recovery and being back at conference and within my old world of Conservative politics. I was there running a fringe event for my not-for-profit. So it was good. It was really nice for have that, and hopefully this podcast brings a different side of politicians that they might not see. And I share those stories not to show off, but for genuine sincerity, that people can see a different side of our politicians, because I know you get a bad reputation, and a lot of the bad reputation around politicians has been around behaviours. Behaviours in politics haven't been good. I'm down talking to my mates, particularly those from the armed forces, and trying to defend my old career, my old profession. Sometimes people I've actually worked with or known personally. But what is it you think from the armed forces community in terms of the values and standards that we live by, and that we transfer into industry, that I see day in, day out there in industry, transferring over into the workplace? What is it you can do to help shift some of those into politics?
So one of the things that has frustrated me for a very, very long time, and as I say, when I was mobilised, my job was about the integration of military people and their military experience and their working lives. And I suppose as a reservist, that's one of the advantages I maybe have, or reservists have over regular forces, is that we've always had a foot in both camps, and therefore we can perhaps be really good translators or facilitators. And I think people in uniform are often massively undersell the things that they think are universal, which are really valuable, really valuable. That almost instinctive understanding of, task, team, individual, that you can't, you got to balance those things. That personal discipline, whether it's, so in the military, it's about the physical fitness side of things. It's about keeping your kit in good order. The old joke about making sure your buttons are done up. It sounds really, really silly, and to people in the military, it's like, that's not a thing. Tell you something. When you're in a position, when you're in a leadership role in a civilian organisation, a commercial organisation, knowing that if you say to someone in your team, "I need you there at 8:30," that people that have been in rig will be there, and they'll be hanging around outside, maybe having a crafty fag at 7 minutes to. They'll be through the door at 5 minutes to, and they'll be there with their stubby pencil and their little Nirex folder, absolutely ready to rock and roll at 5 to the hour. Which for everyone is like, that's not a thing. I promise you, it is a thing. It's a real thing. And having that, the habit of discipline, the habit of teamwork, the buddy system, which once it's in your veins, you never really lose. It's, that those instincts are much, much, much more valuable than people realise. And I tell you, in politics, my God, if we could bottle it and force feed it to everyone in my business, the kind of instinctive understanding that you can't win on your own. You either win as a team or you lose. Those are your two options. You cannot win on your own. This is a team sport. That just like the military, this is a surprisingly small family. If you are shitty to people at the start of your career, later on in your career, do not be surprised if you get payback, because it's a small family with long memories, just like in the military. And again, when I work with people, you and others that have had that experience, they kind of get that. They don't need to be taught it. They don't need to be have it explained to them. And a bit more of that, a bit more the kind of when you look at yourself in the full length mirror, is the person looking back at you someone you can be proud of? And if the answer is no, get a grip. If the answer is yes. Get on with the job.
Brilliant. And do you think part of that get a grip message can apply to CCHQ? It would be remiss of me not to champion my old profession of Conservative agents, and we saw that die away. It's a frustration for me when I see strategic elections being run by volunteers. Volunteers are the backbone of any political party, and it was my role to actually love and nurture volunteers because they are so valuable. However, when it comes down to it, the serious end of running elections and campaigns, you cannot delegate that out to a volunteer. And we've seen that to the detriment of the Conservative Party. What are you going to do to grip the professional side of the party?
And look, it is absolutely essential. And again, I mean, it's going back to my reserve forces. Every reserve force unit had their, permanent staff instructors. Those people who were not just trainers and facilitators within the volunteer unit, but they were also that point of connectivity back into the regular full-time bit of the profession. And I mean, that's exactly how it has to work. The bulk of our horsepower in the Conservative Party, as in most parties, is voluntary. That's particularly true in the Conservative Party because we don't have the kind of the quasi-voluntary, quasi-professional kind of union movement that we can draw down from like the Labour Party does. So we rely very, very heavily on volunteers. But they need to be professionalised. And, I've been knocking on doors with activists who have bucket loads of energy, bucket loads of goodwill. They don't know really what they're doing. They don't know why they're doing it. They're working hard. There's a lot of dissipated energy because they're not working smart, because they haven't got that professional guidance. And the sad truth is that another byproduct of losing that professional interface between the volunteers and the central office, CCHQ, is that there's now a lack of mutual understanding. CCHQ does not now instinctively understand the dynamic in associations, and the associations do not really understand CCHQ. That lack of understanding has brought a lack of trust and some organisational friction, and that means we underperformed at this recent election. So we need to get those points of connectivity, those people that connect, back into the system. We don't have the luxury of having lots of them, but you can't have none of them. Start off with a few. That's a cadre from which you can build out. And as we are more electorally successful, as we get more members, more donations coming in, we can boost the number of professionals on the payroll. There will always be, just like you, mate, a small elite force.
I've never been called that before.
But you do have to have them.
Yeah. And maybe, just maybe, some of those might come from the 15,000 that leave the armed forces every year, or the 30,000 reservists like you and me. So before we go, I did say that memory from that Conservative Party conference where you said to us, don't get angry, get even. What would be the message that you'd like to leave to the Conservative Party, and perhaps more widely to those that you didn't engage with at the last election?
Well, look, maybe I should just represent the point I made at that debating competition, because it stands true today. We can look at the terrible situation that we're in now. We've been reduced to the smallest number of MPs, I think ever, particularly since the Parliament is in the modern era. And we can spend the whole time licking our wounds, doing belly button gazing, whatever, or we can roll our sleeves up and get back on the front foot. And as I say, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We know what we stand for. The values that underpin the Conservative Party are enduring, and I think they're as relevant today. I do think we need to change some of our tone. I've said publicly we need to be a bit more like Reagan, optimistic, forward-looking, energetic, enthusiastic. And we shouldn't have being conservative become synonymous with being grumpy and angry. Doesn't have to be the case, shouldn't be the case. That's what I want to do. Thoroughly conservative vision, which, as you know, that's been in my head and heart since as long as I can remember, long before I was ever elected to anything, but presented in a much more optimistic, enthusiastic, positive way, using all the modern media at our disposal, with an army or a navy or an air force of communicators who are genuinely passionate about what they believe in.
James Cleverly, good luck for conference. Thank you so much for giving me time out of your busy schedule. And don't get angry, get even.
Cheers, Jonny.
Thanks to our guests and thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast, hit subscribe now. Alternatively, you can support our mission by checking out in the show notes below where you can rate, donate, or become our mate. Thank you.